Imagine, imagine you're staring through the James Webb Space Telescope, right?
Oh, wow. Okay. Setting the scale early.
Yeah, exactly. You're looking way past the boundaries of our solar system, past the swirling dust clouds of the Milky Way, straight into this cold, just unimaginable expanse of the infinite void.
Right.
Now, imagine that at the absolute gravitational center of all that staggering cosmic power, you don't find a supermassive black hole. You find like a first-century carpenter.
I mean, it just totally shatters how we intuitively understand scale, doesn't it?
Oh, completely.
We usually view, the physics of the cosmos and then this grounded, fragile reality of human vulnerability as these two totally distinct, non-overlapping paradigms.
They usually are. But today, you and I are exploring a philosophical framework where those two extremes aren't just overlapping, they are literally presented as the exact same thing.
Right.
So, welcome to this deep dive. We have a really highly specific, just densely packed set of sources in front of us today, which were actually brought to us by you, the listener.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating stack.
It really is. It consists of one striking visual image and then three very brief, profound textual statements that that basically construct a complete theological architecture around Jesus Christ.
And it's an architecture that condenses some incredibly vast metaphysical concepts into just a few very pointed, deliberate claims.
Yeah,
The efficiency, the messaging here is, well, it's something we really need to pull apart.
absolutely. And just to set the parameters for you listening, our aim today isn't to validate or critique the theology itself. Right. Or take any kind of religious stance whatsoever.
Right, we're not picking sides here.
Exactly. We're treating these sources as a conceptual blueprint. We're here to just impartially examine the structural integrity of these ideas, the stark contrasts they present, and like how they mechanically interlock.
We're basically looking at the physics of this specific philosophy, how it defines sovereignty, how it operationalizes humanity, and what it suggests about the sheer nature of power.
Which brings us to the core tension we'll be chasing today.
Yeah.
Which is, how do these sources reconcile the mind-bending scale of a cosmic creator with the inherently fragile, limited reality of human humility?
Right, it's a massive paradox.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Starting with the visual. Because before we even analyze a single word of the text, the image you've provided sets a stage that is, frankly, almost overwhelmingly massive.
Yeah, the visual forces you to immediately confront the sheer magnitude of the claim being made well before you have to process the granular theology of the text.
Right. So for you listening, let me just kind of map out what we're looking at here.
Go for it.
At the absolute center of the frame stands a figure representing Jesus Christ. He's dressed in these traditional flowing white robes with a deep red sash draped across his shoulder.
Very classic iconography.
Yeah, very classic. But the environment around him is what completely upends your expectations. Like, he isn't walking a dusty road in the ancient Levant. He is positioned at the literal geometric center of the cosmos.
And this isn't just some static backdrop of twinkling stars either.
Yeah.
It is an intensely dynamic environment.
It really is. There's this blinding, radiant light emanating directly from his figure. It's so intense it almost washes out the center of the canvas.
Right.
And radiating outward from him are these massive, concentric, glowing orbital rings. They look remarkably like the rings of an ancient astrolabe, but blown up to a universal scale.
Yeah, it's wild.
And caught within these glowing rings are entire spiral galaxies, star systems, and planets, all just tethered to him, orbiting his position.
The inclusion of those orbital rings is a really crucial detail.
Oh, how so?
Well, it suggests that the cosmos isn't just this chaotic explosion of matter expanding endlessly outward. The rings imply order, geometry, and sustained intention.
Oh.
The universe in this image is behaving according to a very specific set of laws that all radiate from the center.
The visual juxtaposition is what really arrests your attention, though.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a figure wearing simple, ancient, earthly clothing like fabric woven on a human loom.
Right.
Right. And yet he serves as the absolute gravitational anchor of a sci-fi scale multiverse. It's like placing a humble carpenter at the literal control center of the cosmos. He's standing on this polished, reflective cosmic floor, just seamlessly managing the spin of galaxies.
What's fascinating here is how directly that visual juxtaposition translates into the first piece of text we have to analyze.
Let's hear it.
The excerpt is titled "The Incarnate Architect of the World,"
Okay.
and the text explicitly defines him as the God and creator of this world. So when you look at those swirling galaxies and the blinding light, you aren't merely looking at like a stylized portrait of a historical figure.
Right. It's bigger than that.
Exactly. You're looking at a visual assertion of absolute, unmitigated sovereignty.
An architect is a very deliberate word choice there, I think, because an architect doesn't just stumble upon a building, right? They conceive it. They draw the blueprints. They understand the load-bearing walls of reality itself.
Precisely. The visual and the text combined make a totalizing claim over space, time, and matter. He isn't just existing within the universe. The universe is an extension of his design.
So he's not just a resident.
No, if he is the architect, then those orbital rings and galaxies are his literal blueprint realized. It's a claim of total ownership.
But establishing that kind of absolute, blinding cosmic power immediately creates this massive philosophical friction. I mean, if you are the architect managing spiral galaxies like spinning plates, how do you logically interact with the microscopic, fragile world you built?
Right.
And that friction leads directly into the second half of that first text source.
It forces a pretty harsh transition from the infinite scale down to the finite.
Yeah, it does. The text continues. God and creator of this world who came into world as human.
Wow.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting, because I have to push back on the logic of this framework for a second.
Okay, lay it on me.
If you hold the power to sustain the geometry of the universe, and you step into that universe as a human, aren't you essentially just putting on a costume?
Ah, I see what you mean.
Like, is there actual vulnerability here, or is it purely performative? Because if you have the power to spin galaxies on your finger, biological limitations like hunger, fatigue, or, a stub toe, they aren't real threats.
Right.
You still have the cosmic cheat codes in your back pocket.
That is the central paradox. The concept of the incarnate architect demands you grapple with. The philosophical tension hinges entirely on the authenticity of the limitation.
Exactly.
Because if it's just a disguise, as you suggest, the entire framework just collapses into theater.
It's just a play.
Right. But the theology presented in these sources insists the incarnation was a radical, agonizing self-limitation.
Okay.
He didn't just visit the creation while maintaining infinite attributes. He subjected himself entirely to the biological, physical, and emotional physics of the design.
So it's a genuine contraction. The infinite willingly squeezing itself into the finite, enduring the actual cellular degradation and social indignities of being human.
Yes, a totally willing surrender of advantage. And actually, if you look closely at the image again, the artist has embedded this paradox into the visual itself.
Oh, really? Where?
Look at the posture of the figure. He is standing at the nexus of overwhelming cosmic power, yet his arms are open wide.
Oh, yeah.
His palms are facing outward, tilted slightly up. It is a profoundly welcoming, vulnerable gesture.
I see that now.
Yeah.
It's distinctly non-threatening.
Yeah.
There's no commanding fist raised to demand submission, no pointed finger of judgment.
Exactly. A raised fist would signify forceful domination, which, aligns with the raw physics required to move galaxies.
Right.
But the open, empty hands, that bridges the conceptual gap. That is the posture of the approachable human mentioned in the text.
Does it give it?
Yes. It signifies a willingness to be encountered, to be touched, and potentially to be hurt. The image perfectly balances the terrifying absolute power of the architect with the radical accessibility of the human.
It's a posture that essentially invites the viewer to step into the space, rather than keeping them at a terrified distance.
Exactly.
But, okay, if we accept that the vulnerability is genuine, that the architect truly subjected himself to the fragile human experience, we hit a functional problem.
Which is?
What does that vulnerability actually accomplish? Why is it mechanically necessary?
Yes.
And this brings us to the next source text, which is titled The Path of Divine Humility.
This is where the framework shifts from describing the state of the universe to actually explaining its mechanism.
Okay, I will read this excerpt exactly as it's written, because the phrasing is highly unusual and incredibly dense.
It really is.
It says, to first show to his world that humility to humans is he as human had been humble to all other humans, is the only salvation by God his Father.
Yeah, it requires a bit of unpacking to see how the syntax serves the underlying argument there.
My immediate reaction as a reader is just to the sheer density of the repetition. human, which I assume reads as the root for humble and then humans again,
Right.
all stacked into one run-on thought. From an analytical perspective, why employ that kind of aggressive cyclical phrasing? It feels like the author is trying to forcefully trap the reader's attention on a very specific plane of reality.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author is basically refusing to let the listener escape into abstract, ethereal spirituality.
Ah.
By repeatedly hammering the words human and humal, the text aggressively grounds the cosmic theology into dirt-level interpersonal reality.
You can't ignore the people around you.
Precisely. You aren't allowed to just gaze in awe at the glowing galaxies anymore. You are forced to look at the people standing right next to you.
So it's forcing the cosmic down into the sociological.
Exactly. And what is crucial to understand about this framework is that humility is not being categorized as, like, a pleasant personality trait or a nice moral suggestion.
Right, it's heavier than that.
Much heavier. These sources define humility as a literal mechanism that required physics for salvation. Notice the phrase, to first show to his world.
Right.
It frames Jesus not merely as a passive savior, but as an active demonstrator, a prototype.
A demonstrator. So if he's the architect, it's not enough to just draw the blueprints.
Right.
He had to come down to the construction site and personally demonstrate how the load-bearing walls are supposed to stand up under pressure.
That captures the necessity of the incarnation perfectly. He had to become human to model this extreme, radical humility toward other humans.
Wow.
Think about the mechanics of humility.
Yeah.
You cannot authentically model human humility from an untouchable throne outside of space and time.
No, you really can't.
Humility requires a peer-to-peer interaction. It requires interacting from a position where you have something to lose, where you are subject to the same risks and social hierarchies as everyone else.
Because if you're untouchable, you aren't being humble. You're just being condescending. Real humility requires authentic risk.
And according to this text, that specific modeled behavior, that shared, lived humility, is the only salvation by God his Father. It is framed as the singular authorized path.
So the vulnerability is essential.
Yes. The human vulnerability isn't an incidental side effect of the story. It is the entire functional point of the incarnation.
That significantly raises the stakes of the image we were analyzing earlier.
It really does.
Like the fragile human form with the open hands isn't just an aesthetic choice by the artist to make the architect look friendly. It is a visual representation of the necessary tool required to perform the action of humility. The vulnerability is the engine of the salvation mechanism.
Implies that the spiritual universe operates on laws just as strict as the physical universe.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, just as gravity dictates planetary orbits, radical humility dictates spiritual reconciliation.
Which fundamentally redefines the architecture we're exploring here.
Yeah.
I mean, we started with the cosmic scale of the architect. We navigated the paradox of his genuine human limitation. And we've established that radical peer-to-peer humility is the required mechanism of salvation.
Right.
But that leaves a major philosophical void at the center of this framework.
What do you mean?
Well, what is the foundational motivation? Like, what core value is actually powering this massive cosmic and human operation?
You're looking for the ultimate causation.
Exactly.
If the architect built the system and humility operates the system, what is the underlying nature of the architect that desires this specific system in the first place?
Right. And that leads us directly to our final and actually shortest source text.
Let's hear it.
It's titled The Sovereignty of Forgiveness and Love. And the excerpt states, very simply, the biggest virtues of his, forgiveness and love. So what does this all mean? When we place this final piece next to everything else we've discussed, the contrast is jarring.
It forces a complete inversion of how a logical mind typically measures and understands power.
Yeah, I mean, think about the initial image one more time.
Yeah.
You look at those massive concentric glowing rings, the orbital paths of spiral galaxies, the blinding light of creation.
All right, it's overwhelming.
Your brain immediately associates that imagery with supreme physics. You think of dark matter, gravitational pull, the life cycle of supernovas, the cold, inescapable laws of thermodynamics.
The machinery of the universe.
Yes, the machinery. But this final text entirely bypasses physics. It explicitly names forgiveness and love as the biggest virtues of this creator.
Yeah.
Not intelligence, not brute strength, not mathematical order, forgiveness and love.
This raises an important question regarding the hierarchy of power within this framework.
How so?
Well, typically we equate sovereignty with a monopoly on force, the ability to compel matter or people to do exactly what you want. The power to build a galaxy is the ultimate expression of brute force.
It's raw, unadulterated energy, moving matter from point A to point B on a universal scale.
Exactly. But these sources suggest that true cosmic sovereignty isn't about brute force at all. Building a galaxy within this theology is merely the baseline capability of the architect.
It's just step one.
It's the easy part. The framework argues that the absolute highest form of power, the ultimate, most sophisticated expression of the Creator's nature, is the capacity to love and the choice to forgive.
Because compelling matter to obey gravity is just physics.
Yeah.
But forgiving a human being who has wronged you, that requires a completely different, arguably much more difficult type of power.
Right.
It requires the surrender of the right to retaliate.
And crucially, that power to forgive could not remain an abstract concept just floating in the cosmos. To be fully realized, it had to be executed through the radical human humility we discussed earlier. The sources are arguing that the power to create the universe is entirely secondary to the power to forgive the people living inside it.
Wow. The power to create the universe is secondary to the power to forgive the people living inside it. That perfectly synthesizes the tension between the telescope and the mirror that we started with.
The overarching argument of these materials is that you don't discover the ultimate truth of the cosmos by staring through a telescope at the geometry of the stars.
Right.
You find it by looking in the mirror, acknowledging your own human fragility, and choosing to execute humility and forgiveness toward the other fragile humans in your immediate vicinity.
That is powerful.
Because, according to this blueprint, that is the exact behavior modeled by the architect.
It's a brilliant conceptual loop. The framework takes you all the way out to the furthest, most overwhelming edges of the physical universe, only to drop you right back down into the microscopic reality of your daily, interpersonal human interactions.
It really is.
It is a highly cohesive, tightly engineered philosophical picture. I mean, we moved from the absolute authority of a cosmic architect sustaining the galaxies down into the paradox of a grounded, vulnerable human reality.
Yeah.
We saw how radical humility isn't just a moral suggestion, but the active, required mechanism of salvation. And we found that the entire engine driving this cosmic operation isn't gravity, but the ultimate virtues of forgiveness and love.
It is a profoundly dense philosophical statement about the fundamental nature of existence. And it's remarkable that it's constructed strictly from this one visual and these three very short textual assertions.
It really is an incredible stack of sources.
Yeah.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to gently remind you, our listener, of the parameters we set at the beginning.
Right, our impartiality disclaimer.
Exactly. We've spent this time deeply exploring the conceptual architecture and the internal logic presented in these specific materials. We've unpacked the stark contrast and the mechanical functions of this theology to extract the profound insights within it, strictly impartially. We are not endorsing a doctrine or taking a side here.
The value of an exercise like this lies in understanding the complex mechanics of how different worldviews define reality, limitation, and virtue.
Exactly. But before we sign off, we always want to leave you with a provocation, something that takes the ideas we've unpacked and applies them directly to your own reality.
Based purely on the internal logic of the materials we've analyzed today, here is a final thought for you to ponder.
Let's hear it.
If this framework's hierarchy of values holds true, if the absolute creator of those vast, swirling galaxies considers humility, forgiveness, and love to be his biggest virtues, far surpassing raw power or intellect, how might adopting that exact same hierarchy of values change the way you interact with the people in your own world today?
That's a great question.
If the architect of the cosmos prioritizes the vulnerability of forgiveness over the force of gravity, what happens to your environment when you try to do the same?
That is a fascinating question to leave on. The physics of the cosmos and the vulnerability of the human experience, operating on the exact same principles. Thank you so much for bringing these sources to us and for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.